Hello and welcome to Discussing New Approaches, the show where I sit down with interesting people and discuss new approaches in their fields of expertise. Today I'm joined by Nik Walker, the Titan in Tweed himself, who is Head of Data Engineering at Co-op. He's a ADHD and neurodiversity advocate and also data event speaker on various different topics. Thank you for joining me today, Nik.
Lovely to be here.
Perfect. So obviously today we're going to talk about human centric leadership. That's our main topic for today. Before we do get into that topic, I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey, how you got to where you are now, what were the ups and downs, all of that sort of stuff. So what would be the best place to start?
Probably the beginning.
Yeah.
From the beginning. I am a data leader. I've been in the industry for about 16, 17 years now, which is a terrifying number at some point with my brain. From Leicester originally. So started my data experience, my data career, working at Leicestershire County Council. Woo, foxes. As a bit of an Excel monkey. So I've kind of dragged myself up from the ground as it stands, playing with Access, playing with Excel, suffering the joy that is VBA, all that kind of good stuff. I worked at a few firms back in Leicester way, up until about 2016, 2017, doing various data work. So again, brute forcing Access, SQL servers, data warehouses, Teradata, that old chestnut that has existed, delivering BI and kind of showing people customer journeys and that kind of thing. 2017, met a very lovely young lady who I'm happy to say is now my wife, but she lived down here, so I did the crazy thing and decided to move 150 miles south. Worked in various industries through London, so consulting, banks, all those kind of good stuff, right through to small consultancies doing construction and big consultancies doing crazy things like what KPMG does. Started leading teams probably about 10 years ago when I first moved to London. So it's been quite a big thing for me. Everything from small teams of like 3 or 4 people all the way up to large multinational teams of just under 100 at one point, which was, yes, stand-ups at 5 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening are great fun.
I think everyone can relate to that.
Yeah. The suffering of what goes on for that. Like, you don't realise until you're afterwards and you kind of go, oh, okay, that was a lot. So yeah, there's been some really, really big things. I've worked at Direct Line, I've worked at Dunelm, and I've worked at Co-op most recently, where I've led leaders of I'm a leader of leaders, led teams of up to about 50 people with dotted lines all over the place to do some really kick-ass stuff. So yeah, that's been me.
Amazing. A couple of questions to follow up on that. So I always like to ask people, how did you initially get the data bug? How did you find yourself falling into the sort of data world?
I'm anally retentive at the best of times. Genuinely, I think for me it was even before any of like career wise. I went and did a HND in computing when I was like 16, and the thing that I've got the most is it just says like is okay. Database is really, really good. Oh, is okay. Like, and the database was again Access, SQL servers, faffing around with that kind of stuff back in the days of on-prem. So yeah, did it that way and was kind of really fascinated by data design. And weirdly, I was moderately influenced by Metal Gear Solid 2, as in the game from the early 2000s. They were talking about being able to prove something to people. And do you really know that, and how can you trust and verify? And it's stuck in my head, and it's something I probably carry, I think about at least every couple of days as actually this is why I do it, because I like to be able to trust and verify. I like to be able to prove things to people, and it's kind of been where that is. It's a bit different. I'm a complete dweeb, self-admittedly, but like the influences are there.
I'm the amount of people that have cited certain games come up a lot in terms of influences. It's just that sort of almost pattern recognition way of working, and all these sort of influences. Yeah, I've lost count. People have said that to me.
Guarantee it.
How did you find the north-south divide when you came down? Obviously, it was a personal reasons why you moved over, but was it a completely different way of working?
We're all weird down here. No, I'm joking. Look, I'm from the Midlands. I'm from the Midlands. Like, it's the demilitarized zone between the north-south divide. Like, if the Northerners are angry at the Southerners, I can get pints from them. If you lot are angry at the North, I get pints from you. Everyone hates us. We don't really exist except for Birmingham, and they laugh at them mostly. So, it's fine. I found the transition to London quite difficult. I'll be perfectly honest. I was late 20s when that happened. I actually had my first mental health wobble, big substantive mental health wobble when I first moved down to London. holy hell, there's no support groups down here. It's very expensive. It's very intense. I think a combination of neurodiversity and expectations. So I actually struggled initially, and my girlfriend, now wife, was absolutely instrumental in keeping my brain as sensible as it possibly could be. But it's definitely different. Back home's a lot slower, a lot quieter. Even in the more crazy age of 2024, it's definitely a little bit quieter. London is absolutely bonkers, but it's a lovely city full of lovely people, I guess.
You guess. I was going to say, how do you find, now that you've been here for a while, and how do you find that transition from when you were in your late 20s, looking back, and obviously the change in that time as well, especially in the data industry, might be quite significant.
Yeah, like when I moved to London, data was still kind of, you cocked around with data a little bit, and no one wanted to take it too seriously, and it was the rise of Alteryx kind of, and the low code, no code tools that were really kicking ass, and something I specialized in. I still think there's definitely a place for them. The industry itself seemed to be slowly gaining momentum, and people were starting to realize that the big American tech firms were using data in a way that was completely upsetting the apple cart, and they all want to emulate it. And I don't think any British company or European company or any company has managed to get even a remotely close sliver of that particular pie with the American tech firms. But I think it's definitely different. I think there's been a transition between what data is, what data is sensible. With people, initially it was 2017, 2018. Oh my God, data scientists are needed. Look at this really cool thing. And then COVID happened, and the great big collapse of society that we nearly had with it. And it was we need all the data in place. Data engineers are amazing. And now they've realized that they've got too much data in places that's going a bit questionably in direction. So now data governance are having their shining light in the time. So it's really fun. And it's still very, it's interesting to watch the industry mature. There's definitely some crap bits about that, where there's now rather predatory firms who will harvest as many young grads as they can to charge you obscene sums of money for a recruitment pipeline. Don't necessarily agree with those kind of things, but it is one of those things about maturity. Tech went through the same thing. There's a lot more, I think, cynicism from businesses now, and they have been promised so much by so many for so long, and delivery is now something that a lot of data leaders are failing on. They are pie in the sky evangelicalists, but they can't really deliver on things. I think there's a bit of a reckoning with the industry, and I think the fact that we're tied into some of maybe the downturn with tech at the moment is probably quite indicative of that. But it's been interesting, and I suspect the future is going to be crazy. I'm desperately not going to talk about Gen AI because it makes me want to jump off a bridge. But it is one of those. You're going to ask me a question about Gen AI now, aren't you?
I was going to include it. Yeah. I think only because I do see your point. I did sort of talk about this recently on LinkedIn, but I sort of see data, or tech, data, AI, and now even quantum on the same trajectory. It's just they're at different stages of maturity. Obviously, we had tech first, and now we have data, which is transitioning into a more mature stage. AI is sort of, well, again, AI has been around for a long time, but this new wave of generative AI is now sort of replacing data as the cool kid on the block, where data is now being looked at with a much larger microscope. And then you've got quantum very much in that research stage, which AI would have been, 20, 30 years ago, potentially.
And I think that it boils down to so what? Like, the issue for a long time has been, so what? Like, when it comes down to it, it's so frustrating to see. Like, these are cool technologies. I think Gen AI has got a place in it. Like, the head of data science and data science team at Co-op have got some cool ways they're actually using like natural language processing and Gen AI and smaller models, not like the big all singing, all dancing ones that I quietly cheat when I can't be bothered to write an email on. Like, nothing like that. 100% doesn't happen, I promise. It's one of those things, because data technology went through exactly the same thing. In the before times, we had on-prem, and on-prem was cool, and you bought X amount of resources with Y amount of compute with Z amount of storage, and that's all you kind of had. And if you, as an engineer or a data warehouse guy, cocked up, you'd get the DBA with a big metal ruler coming behind you and going, make that sprot faster, quicker, better, make it more efficient, damn you. Didn't get that anymore. Then the business went through a weird period where it was flirting with virtualization, which is something we kind of do now anyway, because it's all about views. But it went through virtualization, turned out to be extremely expensive. Some bright spark, but invented Hadoop. Everyone went, oh my God, Hadoop is the future. Hadoop is the future. We went, cool, that's really interesting. I've used Hadoop, it's great fun. I still kind of use it now, I guess. It's great fun, but you still can't provision stuff out to business stakeholders. And okay, fine. Right, well, we're going to figure out a new way of doing this, and we're going to create the data lake. Okay, so you've put all your data in a place. Now what? Oh, well, we're going to put it into a warehouse. Okay, so we're going to do the on-prem thing again, but with cool cloud resources, yeah. Okay, so there's a separation between how the data goes. Oh, okay, we've got the lake house now. Okay, that's really cool. Personally love it. But it's very on-prem with on steroids. And now Gen AI's come along and they're going, oh my God, it's the greatest thing. It's like, cool, give me a use case. Show me how people are going to use it. Show me how people are going to interact with it. How are we monitoring it? We don't know. We just want to use it. Okay. And this is why Microsoft has wedged it into Paint and Notepad, because that's exactly the kind of thing we needed. But there's no use cases for it. So what? Gen AI is cool. It is kick-ass. I think it's awesome. Interested to see where it goes. Interested to see how it goes with quantum. I've got friends in that space as well who are just like, it is the next thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, these people are eating the wrong bread. But
yeah, again, I think the coolness factor with AI outweighs at the moment the potential for it. And again, we get caught up in why we've invested it into the first place, which is a little bit of the sci-fi dream of AI in the future. But I think,
who doesn't want to sit there and go, computer, give me the answer to this, like Picard, preferably with her. Like, who doesn't want to do that? I absolutely want to do that. It requires you to have a good foundational thing. You have to have clean data. You have to have well-governed data. You have to have well-structured data. Dare anyone to try and get a computer to ask it certain things. Ask it a question about Judge Dredd. It doesn't always know the answers, and it cocks a lot of things up. Dweeb.
And I think what's interesting is that the data and AI may be slightly differently to technology, but probably not. I imagine technology went through the same teething period. The problems aren't necessarily with the technology. To a degree, there are problems there. I'm not saying there aren't, but I think there's a bigger problem with the human side, the stakeholder side, which arguably can't be solved with technology. I mean, you can try and make it, no code and more accessible, and focus on the UI and how you present that. But the problems lie probably more in the soft skills, data literacy, and the human element, which brings us nicely on to the topic of conversation. It all links together. So I suppose bringing it back to the central topic, what is human centric leadership? Because it's probably not a term that most people would have come across, being that it's coined by you. Yeah. So what is it?
So it's an approach to leading teams. So it's an approach to leading teams. It's an approach to interacting with stakeholders. It's an approach to, I'm not 100%. Yeah, I'll be perfectly frank about it. What I do know it's about treating people differently. It is something I started working on very early on in my career, just mentally, about the experiences that I had as a neurodiverse guy. I've got ADHD, combined type ADHD, which means I'm crap at everything sometimes, but it also means I've got some weird superpowers that kind of let me do things until God knows what time in the morning and still remain as a human being. I have gone through a lot of stress and trauma with these kind of things, trying to figure out how to function in society as a whole, function as a human being in workplaces, which has always been really, really hard for me. Social cues are quite difficult. There's definitely an autistic streak in me somewhere down the line. Social cues are great fun. But it's all these kind of things that have kind of built up over time. 2019, I lost my brother. He went out on a motorbike and didn't come home. It is the fulcrum point of my life to want to make people's lives easier and better. It's hard. I went through a long period through COVID in therapy, dealing with stuff that's in my brain, and realizing I kind of came out with three things of that, like losing my brother, doing this therapy stuff, and also like not being permitted and I affectionately refer to it as white guy with a beard syndrome. It doesn't just affect white guys, but it is a thing about when your mental health sucks. I intimated earlier that I had, when I first moved to London, my mental health was bad. Like, I found myself on a railway station, like staring down. I thought, no one should ever be in that position. And over COVID, I sat there thinking, no one should ever be in that position. Started speaking to a lot of people about things, and it was always those of us who were working over COVID. I was definitely one of them. It was brutal. There was long hours. It was just, firms could keep people on furlough, but they were choosing to bin them off because it's the best thing to do. And it was just seeing like really crap companies, really shite leaders. There's no other word for it, but like really just a ball dropped. And so like I started to sit there and I started just to write down what I do for people. And I started thinking, I don't actually know enough. So when I got myself certified as a counsellor, because I'm a lunatic like that, when I did my level 3, level 4 and CPCAB stuff, so like hello, I can do weird therapy things, but I can speak the language and I can speak the lingo to because I understood what it did for me. And I think that leaders need to start stepping into a space where they can support their teams emotionally. I'm not telling them they have to be counselors. I'm telling them that when someone turns around and says, Eric, I've had the worst day of my life because this thing outside of work has happened, the response of, well, that's really bad, man, but really need you to do your job just isn't acceptable in 2024 anymore. And what I want from it is to start getting people, leaders, especially with Gen Z and millennials, swinging by into a good place to do that. So it's about using baseline counseling knowledge, I guess, to kind of facilitate better conversations with people, to make sure that what you're doing, how you're behaving, how you're acting is genuine and authentic to people, because people are sick of crap leaders. So yeah, that's it, and I will try not to tirade too much on that.
I mean there's lots of questions that I think come off the back of that. I think, again, when you were mentioning looking down at the railway track, I think everyone or most people can relate to that. I think I had probably one of my lowest periods, if not my lowest period, during the COVID era, as we might call it now.
The times.
It's cultural scarring, isn't it? So it's that weird, and I think, like you said, where you have things happening at work, which are always going to be stressful and high pressure, because that's the nature of delivering business. It's the nature of earning money. But then when you have the social constrictions that COVID brought, where you can't escape those stresses in your day-to-day life because you're trapped, it forces you to focus on the problems in your personal life and in the work life. I mean, I think there's some crazy statistic that I saw running around that divorce rates jumped up during COVID because married couples actually had to spend time together, and they realized that they didn't like each other.
And like, my wife and I got married 2019. Like, we got married 2019, and like we talk about it, we joke about it, and we're like, when we see some like friends who had long-standing relationships, but like also there was funny bits to stuff like that, where she'd hear me talking at work and it's just like, you are so weirdly manipulative at work. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because you just say certain things. I'm like, am I genuinely manipulative? No, it's just saying things like keen and synergize and the weird language that no one should ever truly be exposed to in business. It's just very different when I think, and so that contributes to it, where people haven't seen that side of their other half. Like, but it is also just around that time, I think, forced a lot of people to look inwards. There's a friend of mine works in the creative industries. He works in theatre. He's a lunatic. You'll love it. But his thing was, when the world stopped turning for business, everyone looked to actors and actresses to not necessarily be entertained, but to make it make sense. There's TV shows that are over COVID, and it's just bizarre to rewatch them, because you're just like, it's stark, but
it's what we always do with whenever something happens culturally. We look to art to make sense of it.
Art, religion, philosophy, and I think a lot of people have. I'm a big philosophy nerd now, big psych nerd. A lot of my friends are. We went from lads who are super career driven and bish bash bosh, nice blue suit. Well, dark grey suits for me, certain tweed suits for me. But like, we went from that to actually we're going to talk about feelings, and we're going to have a really uncomfortable conversation. And like, I'm mad proud of many of my friends for coming through this. But like, there's also a lot of people there now who double down on the other side of that, and it's just ignore all of that good progress we've made because business. So, and it's okay to be either or of those as long as you're healthy about it. And so Human Centric Leadership is also just focused on supporting yourself and how to do things now, how to do things for others, not just for yourself, like, which is what business is ultimately kind of squared us up for.
So why do you think that's important? You know, what's the draw, I suppose, to this?
For looking after yourself, or
and for businesses, I suppose, as well. You know, why is it important for them to adopt?
It almost sounds pity party-ish. So I think I'm a mid-range millennial. I think that's where it counts off. We have had the biggest stick thrown at us for 4 generations. And like boomers, Gen X, there's one in between, apparently. I don't know. It's definitely not an age thing, but it's more an attitude thing. Many of us graduated or started work during the Great Financial Crisis, 2008, and it was absolutely hellish for so many of us. All the asset prices, cost of living hasn't just been a new thing, it has been a constant problem for probably 14 years. I think it's made we're also probably more au fait with our emotions. There's more of us who went through places at times where psychoanalytics was more prevalent, and maybe there's a stereotype of American therapy speak that kind of comes into that. But actually, there's a lot more kids who, for example, I went through the Ritalin era of the 1990s, where every young boy that was naughty definitely needed Ritalin. It's not a thing. But we were more au fait with probably talking about these things amongst ourselves. We're now the leaders of organizations, not necessarily the top dogs. I have a privileged position that I am senior leadership as a head of. I've got friends who are directors, I've got friends who are partners, and we're all millennials, and we're all asking the same things. We're all challenging the same status quo, that you can't just continue to burn people to the ground in the same process that's happened multiple times, like millennials have done that. Because also millennials are asking for better, and Gen Z are asking for a lot better. And Alpha will also probably do exactly the same. Thus why over COVID we had quiet quitting, we had great resignation, we had, for lack of a better phrase, someone on Reddit summed it up quite nicely, fuck you, pay me. And absolutely mad props to you, mad props to anyone who's kind of got that. But businesses need to be way more aware of, don't just send out your survey at the end of the year. How's your year gone? Well, actually it's been pretty crap, because business process, oh, that's really bad, here's a pizza party, because it just gets ridiculed in an era of very quick, like, communication through Reddit, through Instagram, through whatever social media craziness there is. Like, I'm useless at social media. Look at my hashtags on LinkedIn, they're always awful. But it's one of those things where businesses now need to recognize that their senior leaders are the ones actually probably leading this charge. And sometimes they're still quite quiet when there's potentially problematic leaders at the top, or we're more au fait with the concept of what social justice is, not necessarily the burn down the whole system and everything like that. But if we see people who have problematic behavior, we've been there, like, and so we're aware of what our concerns are. Businesses need to be far more. Organizations need to be big. Businesses implies that the government is really good at these things. Like, organizations collectively will need to start looking and being better at these things, because their staff are going to be better. All you have to do is look at some of the big tier 1 banks who have demanded return to office, and we just can't find the staff. No one wants to work anymore. No one wants to work for you. That, like, there's plenty of people out there who want to work.
Yeah, especially in these markets.
Yeah, and like, it's got a little bit better post budget. Like, thanks red paper rags and for propagating that complete nonsense. But like, it's got a little bit better post budget.
And for future reference, this is 2024 November. Just for anyone watching this in the future, as context. Yeah. Labour budget.
Yeah, there we go. Labour budget. And I will definitely not go off on a political tirade. So I think it's very interesting to see the difference that it has caused, but it is the expectation now that, well, COVID's over, return to office is over, just get back to work. They are getting back to work. People are working from home. People are caring more for each other. People are looking at each other and actually helping each other if we fall over or we trip and we fall. Like, we want to care again. There's more and more people who are saying, actually, there's social changes now that we as individuals need to go with, and organizations need to follow that. And it's not just the folks who want to take us back in time, it's the folks who want to take us forwards towards whatever that looks like, where we actually care more about each of the organizations. Do need to pick a culture with that and let people drive what that culture is from the bottom, and Human Centric Leadership should be able to help that by ultimately letting you be yourself.
So I suppose, what's the benefit for businesses? So if you're a business who, you might be, the seeds of thought are there. You might want to change your style of leadership. You might recognize a few problems. But like anything, there's an element of risk whenever you change something. Again, changing governments might be a good example at the moment. What is the benefit for them? Why should they do it? What are they going to get out of it? Because again, like everything in business, there's a certain transactional element to it.
Oh, absolutely. It is. I think the process itself is normally black and white, very unemotive. The people running the process are not black and white, not unemotive, and so like they get into problems with that. When you start focusing on an individual's needs, you will allow them to be safe. So, for example, I've got a particular individual in my team. He has his own needs. And we're supporting him with those needs. He knows that he doesn't have to be online 9 to 5 in the office 4 days a week or anything like that. He's supported, so he knows what he's doing. He's delivering really good work. He takes time off occasionally when he just can't get his head out of the clouds, or he wakes up one day and just thinks, I physically can't face the day because mental health or whatever that is. He knows he's safe. He knows his job isn't just going to vanish. We support him with that. And he continues to do really good work for us. Occasionally he'll do insane things like work at 2 o'clock in the morning, but that's when he's working best. So it's a balance of kind of those things. It's a measure on his deliverables. As a wider organizational thing, when you start allowing people like that to be supported, they'll also challenge the status quo. Recruitment processes are often really, really fun to go through as a neurodiverse guy. They are designed with psychometric testing and metrics management and press all these funny little buttons within a certain amount of time, and they are a nightmare fuel for the neurodiverse. In data and tech, that's up to 3/5 of a population, like in tech and data. So the average population is 12% who are neurodiverse, so 1 in 10 people struggle with recruitment processes. When you have human-centric leadership in there, people are going to sit there, raise their hand and go, this sucks, and we cannot continue to have that. If you've got those people challenging, if you've got those people driving the good change, the best change in your business, you're opening your recruitment processes. They're better, they're stronger, they're faster, they're more acceptable, they're more inclusive. So you're going to encourage people, and word gets around real quick in many industries that, hey, these guys are actually a bit of all right. They're supporting people through everything. They're supporting people with reasonable adjustments in the office. Their recruitment processes on a doddle. You can make them. Data engineers are wonderful to try and figure out how they work because we're all a bit different and odd. But it is very like how you can build those kind of processes up. Then you've got sides of that where the business processes can be directly challenged. They can be made sure that they're inclusive, that the products you're buying are inclusive, that you're not creating products that are potentially controversial. You're not making adverts for retail firms that are controversial and may be in the news recently. Like it's one of those things that is very difficult to do, but also that you're not giving people uncanny valley by, oh look, here's a stereotypical woman who has stereotypical women things. Okay, maybe you could make it a bit more inclusive and a bit more wholesome, or you can figure it out, or a guy with ADHD, or like there's a whole plethora of benefits to an organization if there's. And I go back to neurodiversity because it is probably the fulcrum for me. If you've got 10% of the general population with one of these things, and you make products that can't be used by someone with a neurodiversity or a disability or anything else, you're losing huge chunks of market share to what is ultimately these people who would buy your stuff if you could make it for them. Like it is genuinely a thing. It's probably less about my framework and more about the inclusivity side of things, which is foundational to it. But it's more organizations need to be kind of taking their leaders away from top-down management and giving more ownership to the people at the bottom, because they're the ones who will ultimately drive the best change. And let them organize and let them do the thing, because they'll see more there than ever before. Like if you're C-suite and you've got your head in the clouds, you'll never be able to see what's down there. But those people are there on the shop floor every single day, and they'll know what the problems are. Ask them and give them the time and the patience and support them with their problems. Simple.
It almost sounds like a data-led process, as in you've got the ideas from data, because again, you know, your data pipeline, what you're trying to do with the data all at the end is only going to be as good as what you're doing at the beginning. You know, your data quality essentially. You know what you're inputting into that process. So I suppose, is it fair to say it would be you're trying to maximize productivity, I suppose, in a way, not necessarily as people as products to be maximized, but you're reducing the chance of things like massive burnout. Because again, for neurodiverse, again being ADHD myself, I know the knock-on effects that neurodiverse specific burnout has, and burnout for everyone. It's not nice. If you burn out, your capacity for work and everything just drops to zero.
It's not even capacity for work, it's capacity for life. Like I've got mates who burns out over COVID and they're still struggling. Like months and months, years and years down the line, they're like post 22, they're still struggling. Like that's life for them, unfortunately, and it sucks. It makes people more, I guess it makes people more understanding of some of the big problems that are out there. I did have someone at a workplace whose family got caught up in some of the craziness that's going on around the world right now. I've had friends and family caught up in some of that craziness, and you can't separate that as well. Like it is a data-led thing. So I'll start that entire thing for you again because I can't get my words to make a lot of sense. So it is a data-led thing, and I always use a store because of the way that I think about things. And if you've hired 15 people for a store and you've got one of them who is disabled in some way, shape or form physically, you have to make reasonable adjustments for them. Like maybe the doors not wide enough. Maybe the door in the winter isn't wide enough. Maybe the way to get behind a till isn't helpful. The tills are too high. You make reasonable adjustments by changing things. There are legal processes for that. When you've got something like a neurodiversity, or this is getting bigger and better now, and I'm really, really happy to see it, but like when women have issues of pregnancy, loss of pregnancy, these kind of things, menopause, actual problems that affect 50% of the population who can now stand up and go, I have these problems on a regular basis. And society goes, oh, no, you don't. But actually, women, allies of women, are turning around and saying, absolutely not. Like, you need to be supporting these people. Reasonable adjustments start coming in. Maybe you can work from home, or maybe it's supporting them in some way, shape, or form. I'm not an expert on those. All I know is that people need support. Again, Human Centric Leadership will take that data approach to it of, there is a problem. How do you help fix it? You don't necessarily, when you go to a business unit, you don't know how to fix their problems. They know their business problems. They know their issues. I won't know how to fix a lass's issues if she's having one. But I sure as shit can be the ear where she sits there and goes, these are the problems I've got. And I go, right, what can I do to help you and support you? And that's what it's about most of the time. If someone sits there and tarnishes me with the ADHD brush, well, we just need to get you some fidget toys, he says with a pencil. We just need to get you some fidget toys. No, what I need you to do is accept that I'm a bit odd and my behaviour is a bit weird. And it is for me. I'm staring off into space. I'm looking out of windows. I'm generally throwing something towards the ceiling, or things that are generally not conducive towards that. And those are just examples of it, that if people shut up and listen and say, how can I support you? That's what the biggest part of it is. And it will be about whatever that support needs to be gets put into place, because then those people feel happier. I feel happier if my stuff is, if my neurodiversity is taken into place. If people have health issues, whether that's disability or periods or menopause or whatever it is, if they're heard, seen, supported, they're going to stick around for longer, and they're also going to help brothers, sisters, anyone who identifies otherwise who've also got issues, and can drive that kind of change for them. So it is a data thing somewhere down the line, and I'd love to be able to monitor it more, but SPII is a hell of a thing. But it's one of those things that I know people want better. People have wanted better, and now we have voices to demand better. And all this is the opposite side of the spectrum, I think, where it's, hey, I've got this issue, and it's not a production environment blown up because we give it to the junior, which is always fun. But it's not that. It's, I've got this issue at home. I've got this issue outside of work. I'm sorry I'm late, boss. The bus has got a crap ramp. It's whatever it is, because they're a wheelchair user or something like that. It's more about, as a leader, then you support them. Wow, well, what can we do better? How can we change that system at work? How can we, and more inclusivity means people stick around more. They're going to give more of a damn about you and your organization. And you're going to get people applying to you who probably are in their communities because they've heard you're good at what you do. So it is data led. I'd love it to be more data led, but like it is a big thing for that.
And again, coming from a recruitment perspective, I've seen this with Talos and everywhere else that I've worked. Word of mouth is still the most powerful recruitment tool that you can possibly have. So if you're providing an approach that takes into account the human element within people, and even if they do leave, so again, retention will most likely rise, and there is some evidence to suggest that even with neurodiverse people, if you do get that right, they will stick around and really work really hard for you. Like
Gartner released some stuff over, I think it was 23, where it was like the average neurodiverse human being is 220% more productive or something like that than a non-neurodivergent person. And you're a bit like, well, why is that? Because they feel like they belong, and belonging is a huge part of that. And if you ostracize anyone for any reason, people are going to hear about it. Like all you need to do in an era where I can sit there online and go, these guys are the worst because reasons, that quickly goes around the globe. Even if it's nonsense, even if it's not even nonsense, like it quickly goes around the globe, and the damage to PR and public relations and image and marketing things is felt immediately. So word of mouth is still the biggest thing of that. I know plenty of firms that if a job came up and I was on the market kind of thing, I'd look at them and go, absolutely not. Because I know what they're like for ADHD is. I know what they're like for neurodiverse people. I won't give them my productivity. I'm amazing at what I do kind of thing. Pardon the sheer audacity and arrogance to have that, but like it is one of those things. And I suspect software engineers, data engineers, nerds in general, anyone who works in tech, if they see somewhere they're not going to be supported, they ain't going to go there. Like, it's just one of those. So word of mouth is a hell of a thing.
It is, and it can work both in your favour and against you. And it's not even just for neurodiverse people. I think that sense of belonging. I think neurodiverse people are just more sensitive to it, but neurotypical people will also feel it as well. It will apply to everyone.
100%. I had a really lovely conversation. I can include this as well somewhere down the line. I had a really good conversation with someone at work who's recently had their ADHD diagnosis, and they're going through it. There's a lot of people. I don't know. Are you later life diagnosis, or have you always been like me, the kid who's had it and was diagnosed very early on?
No, definitely later. So I think it really started when I did the podcast with Mark.
Okay.
Or just before. So I
so the past few years kind of thing.
Past few years, definitely. And then you look back and you sort of see, that makes sense. Like why I thought, why I think the way I do.
Yeah.
And you can be a little bit more forgiving to yourself as well, because you're like,
it's the period of like you find out, and then it's like the grief period, and then it's like you go back up and you succeed more is what I call it. I was talking to this person, they got there 6 months ago, and it was really lovely to hear them kind of talking about the community that's around it, not necessarily just at work, but like you go online and you talk to people and it's like, hey, you're one of us, and it's like it's almost instant rapport because you belong to the community. For 30 years people haven't been able to have their ADHD or autism or dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, OCD, ODD, whatever it is, whatever thing you have that's part of neurodiversity has been told, you keep that away from us, it's not good. But now people are actually allowed to express that, and what they're finding is communities of people who've had to keep it hidden, and we're the most welcoming human beings, and you belong with us. Like, don't worry about it, like you belong. Like you and I are doing this, we belong to the nice little niche of ADHDers, and we're dweebs about it. But if you find other ADHDers, you're like, the Spider-Man pointing meme very quickly kind of happens, especially when there's multiple of you and you're just like, what's going on? That belonging is really, really important. And it's not just neurodiverse people, it's people who go through life. It's I did a speechy, sporky, publicy type talking thing back in July about this topic, about human centric leadership. And I always start off with that thing about my brother. I suffer every day, or I don't necessarily suffer, but I always think about him every day. I've got a nice photo of him and stuff like that. And it's only this year that I've started feeling more human about it. And I had someone come up afterwards and went, I lost my brother 3 years ago. I get it, man. Like, he just looked at me and went, I get it. And like, it's an awful thing to go through, but it's belonging, because it's bloody lonely out there. And sometimes you do focus on those things. And if organizations focus on the support, the care, the love, the consideration for their people and their employees beyond just a number must go up, that number will continue to happen and go up, but it'll probably go up faster and better because everything starts feeling better for the employees. If you're more organized and stuff, if your processes are more focused on inclusivity rather than just brute force, it'll work.
So I suppose, is it a framework that you apply to this? Is there a sort of, so if I was an organization, again, linking it back to earlier, looking at, planting the seeds, starting this journey, what would be the steps that you need to take in order to do this? Is there sort of a framework that you can follow?
Not yet. I haven't put it down. That's what's frustrating me the most. Because I haven't got a hook for it to be able to do that. The way that I do it is I write about it prolifically online. There are there's what I effectively refer to as the heart of what this is. There's at the bottom, there are the very passive kind of behaviors that are expected from leaders, not managers. Managers, you take a course and it shows you how to do a one-to-one, do a business process, blah, 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 all that stuff. Like, we know how to do that. What it doesn't show you is the traits that you need to do that. So it's about training people to have these traits: honesty, integrity, not necessarily not the duty of care, but it's those traits of being an honest person. I'm honest to a fault, pretty much, all the time. It's care, it's showing people kindness, it's that empathy when someone says something awful, not just looking at them going, that's really bad, man, which is something that happened to me when I first spoke about my brother. He just looked at me and went, I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, you sound it. But it's like that empathy, that base level empathy that is often cut out of organizations. On top of that, there's very active things that people do. It's you're walking the talk. Like, I can talk this stuff, but if you go and ask my engineers, they'll say, yeah, he's a pain in the ass, but he's a bloody good leader. And like, if we've had problems, we know we can raise it to him. And like, I go on stage and I talk about mental health struggles, and I talk about guys' issues, and I talk about ADHD, and I talk about these things. And I'm not just talking about them. I'm very loudly saying, this is what I stand for. Come at me, bro. But also, here I am if you need love and you need the support. The central point of this is about leaders having to know themselves. Back to COVID's madness, I think a lot of people looked in the mirror and didn't really recognize the human being behind them. or in the reflection, I guess, it didn't really recognize that person. They recognized the business person, but they didn't recognize themselves. And given too much time on our own, I think we all got a little bit spare, but we all looked very internally at ourselves. To what I said about philosophy, a lot of my mates got into it. I got into it. I wish I could walk around in a toga or a cloak and be like, yeah, it's philosophy, but I'm not that good at it, not yet.
Tweed
cloak, yes. I don't think my wife would appreciate that in the slightest. But it's very much, it's one of those things that I think people, you have to know yourself in order to do it, because you have to know how you're going to respond to awful situations. When a staff member says, this awful thing has happened to me and I'm having the worst day of my life, you don't just sit there and say, that sounds really bad. It's, Jesus, how can I help? What can I do? These base level things that we do in society. If someone falls over in the train station, you don't just stand there and look, you walk over and you help them. But for some reason in business, we don't do, because it's not seen as productive, or it's not seen as the right thing, or people cry at work and we just kind of like usher them away into a room. Yes, it's for privacy reasons, but then not talking about it and kind of going, well, what was the root cause of that? What actually happened? Oh, there's something going on at home. Do they need support? Does he need support? Does she need support? Do they need support? I think it's that's there. It's there's no hook to it, but those are the biggies for me. There's the various traits for it, because the thing is, if you've got a good leader at it, and I've had it in places where I live this every single day, even when I'm stressed, even when I'm pulling my hair out through frustration at things, the people will look after me, but then people will also feel empowered to challenge what's going on. And to what I was saying earlier about, if you've got people who are sitting there going, actually, I'm safe to challenge, they will challenge the status quo. You will have a more inclusive culture beneath you who will demand better and will help you do better, rather than just following what the media says or following, wokeness or whatever it happens to be. Like it is, you will have a workplace that's inclusive of every single person. And those people will make sure your products, your marketing, your PR, your whatever their speciality is that, just by having a few leaders at the top who are good for that. My end goal for this would be some kind of chief psychological officer who could have, here's how not to make manipulative marketing campaigns, but here's how to also look after your people. And it's not just look after them and care and have a cuddle party. It's nothing like that. It is about knowing how to have very, very hard conversations in a very psychologically safe way, because it's necessary in the 21st century, in 2024, to be able to have that, to be able to have those conversations. And it's something that people are demanding more and more.
Where do you think that I suppose perception comes from, of this sort of, I suppose you might call it old school business thinking, potentially, but removing the human element, removing the emotion from what we are, is just very emotional beings, most of the time. So where do you think that comes from? And I suppose also, how does this relate to your points on sort of Gen Z earlier? Because I think partly because of the things that you've mentioned in terms of very chaotic periods, the pandemic, which has arguably been, we had sort of Spanish flu a long time ago, which was horrible.
100 years ago.
Yeah, 100 years ago. And I think as well that generation were just sort of used to these world-ending events. So there was but then we saw psychological scarring. You can see it in, again, I'm a literature buff because I'm English literature graduate. You can see it in the literature of the time, again, linking it to art that we were talking about earlier. There's so many novels and poems and everything written on the cultural scarring that war had, on the cultural scarring that even the Spanish flu had.
Jesus, look at post-World War II. The kids of the guys who came home from war, to this day, there are soldiers out there who are traumatized themselves by awful things. They go through hurt people. I think that's Gabor Mate. I think so. He wrote a book about the body keeps a score, and it's all the things that happen. Your body physically responds to stress. Even if you sit there stoic and impassive, painfully, toxically stoic, you don't, your body, this keeps the score. Whether you think it does or not, you're going to sit there shaking and freaking out. Your amygdala's wired. I had a particularly rough few years about things with mental health. I've had a childhood that's a bit wonky when it comes down to certain things. It's given me things like that, and there's a lot in there. Where this cold-hearted bastard business stuff comes from is it's always quite funny, and you'll probably hear listeners turn off when I sit there and say it's a very patriarchal thing. It's a very Protestant work ethic kind of thing. The woman stays at home, the man goes to work, and it's always been that way. It's black and white. the attitudes of various literary manipulative parts of this. Well, the British have got the Blitz spirit. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we all had a stiff upper lip. Okay, 15% of like people in London didn't have 50% didn't have homes after the war. There was a ton of suicides. Marriages broke down. People lost kids. The generation that came afterwards was massively traumatized across like huge swathes of things. Back home, there's a road next to where I grew up that was hit by bombs, kind of thing, and the grandparents there are the descendants of that, and they've clearly got trauma every time they walk past it, and you're just a bit like, these people walk around with these things. And so
that's why we pushed for the NHS afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly the point. Despite the fact it was massively unpopular to do so, it was the right thing to do, and it should always be that thing. But this is where this comes from. It comes from this stereotype of the stiff upper lip. You can only have a stiff upper lip if you don't have things to worry about. I'm a big fan of Stoicism. I am actual Stoicism, philosophical Stoicism. Seneca's letters to a Stoic, whichever way around that goes, are literally an old dude going to a young lad, turning around and going, these problems are not easy to deal with. They're awful. Death is a bad thing. This is a really hard thing. This is really hard, and it's about how you respond to things, and caring in a nurturing and very loving way. Actually, when you read these things, it's like I've lost my patience as well. And like this concept of a stiff upper lip doesn't exist anywhere, but it's been a social paradigm that's been put onto us, especially as guys, that we're not allowed to show that. We have to be cold-hearted, and business is black and white and cold. Fundamentally disagree. Business is run by people. Business as an organization is run by people of every race, shape, color, creed, bearded face, whatever it happens to be. Every possible combination of human being runs your organizations. And to sit there and say emotions don't matter derides them to just be ones and zeros, as opposed to fundamental parts of an organization that make it tick. So again, millennials, Gen Z are much more emotive about these things. Good. Like, and it's the thing that will need to be embraced. Those emotions will need to be embraced, not necessarily as I can make more money out of this, but to make sure the things you're doing are the right things you're doing.
I suppose it leads naturally to the next question, because so obviously something like this is challenging the status quo, like we've just said. From this sort of old ideology, things are always in a state of change because they have to be.
Yeah.
If you don't change as a business, and we see this as businesses, Blockbuster. If you don't change, and that's the first one that came to my mind.
Yeah.
If you don't change, you die. If you do change, you become a Netflix. So what do you?
Oh yeah, inshitifying by advertising. Yeah, great.
Yeah. I mean, again, maybe you can change too much, and then go the opposite way. But when you do have something that challenges the status quo, what pushbacks have you had to this, if any, or even ones that you're imagining?
Yeah, like I've had loads. I've challenged the status quo pretty much my entire career. As an ADHD guy, trying to get people to understand ADHD that's the biggest one that I've had. Lots of the same stereotypes and lots of the same comments you've probably had, where it's just like, well, what do you need? I'll provide it for you. And it's like, I need you to understand this. I don't want to understand this. I need to get it there. And the biggest one is, why the hell should I care? Which I think I've probably answered with it as unsuccinctly as I possibly could in the past hour or so. Because there's lots of people out there with different issues. When I've spoken to some peers and to friends who are at different organisations, they're interested, but they don't know how to show that part of themselves. So actually the pushback happens when we come across like the guy in the blue suit who's never had a problem in his life. The best leaders are people who have gone through something. I put that out there because there's a lot of leaders who've had a very easy ride in life, and they're crap to work for, because they generally think everyone's had the same experience, and no, actually it's not. They're the ones who give the pushback, and it's like, well, that's not a big problem. It's like, yeah, it is. I've worked at a place where there's been psychometric testing on the front end of things, and I take it as my Human Centric Leadership use case of saying, this psychometric testing outs neurodiverse people. We don't want to apply for these jobs. Why should I care? Well, 60% people in data are neurodiverse. I'll always go back to that, and it's like, fine, you're going to just cut out 60% of your potential recruitment. Well, no, well, change it then. Like, you need to change it. You need to understand that. It's arguing with them in a safe way of being able to argue with them. They're the people who I generally get the most pushback from, people who haven't gone through something themselves, whether that's death, whether that's neurodiversity, whether that's something that's traumatized them. Like, and it sounds awful to say that the best leaders are people who've had stuff happen to them, but they're probably the most empathetic because they get it, they can relate to it. And those people who have gone through something ask me like how to do this stuff and how do you lead a one-to-one? How do you have a hard conversation with someone where they've really dropped the ball and so they don't feel like they're going to get fired? I've had to do that in the past couple of weeks where someone dropped the ball and they were like, I'm really, really sorry. I'm like, calm down. You're not going to get fired. Nothing. You're just got a permanent record. Like, we just keep an eye on it. Like, things break. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it's how you reassure someone that they're not going to lose their job in 3 weeks because of downsizing or something. How you make sure that you're communicating with your team to say, here's how we're going to structure ourselves. The ways that we're going to structure it are like this. This is what the future looks like, as opposed to sitting there and kind of, oh, well, there's going to be more of this in there and kind of arty-farty, like just talking about it. Show them, like either show them with a whiteboard or show them with PowerPoint. Get good at that. But like, it's about communication for that. So I think that's the most helpful way of it. If there is pushback, you ignore it. You have to ignore it. It is the right thing. If you honest to God, honest to heart, honest to whatever deity you believe in, honest to Darwin or whatever it happens to be, like if whatever you fancy, if you sit there thinking this is the right thing to do, go do it. Like, you will find more advocates behind you before you realize it. When I started talking about ADHD, I was cacking it. And I just said, look, I'm very outly ADHD. This was 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. When I started talking about it. And I thought initially, I'm going to be ostracized. I'm never going to work again. This is going to be absolutely crazy. It's a medical condition. I see how people are. No, the amount of people who are just like, this is awesome to hear guys talking about this. When I've had mental health things, I've spoken about mental health things. People just come up and they're like, this is awesome to hear 6'4" lumberjack clad, tweed clad dude, like giant motorbiker, like talk about his mental health, like, because it's really important. I'm the antithesis of certain bald-headed morons online. Like, it's very much one of those things that if you find pushback, you're doing the right thing, because it means it's making somebody uncomfortable who needs to change with the times. Like, if you're going wielding a large bat in the office, you are doing it wrong. It is about conversation. Like, lots of people are more intimidated if you're wielding something at them. Like, if you're going to spend time challenging the status quo, you're going to get people who push back. But ultimately, like I said, if it's the right thing, if you think it's the right thing to do, and there's people around you going, go do it, just do it.
Again, yeah, you can't get through change unless, again, the best things always require uncomfortability, I think, as to get through them. You know, you make the biggest personal changes when you go through uncomfortability. But again, I think to your point on, you know, if you're worried about your job, and this applies to neurodiverse people, neurotypical people, again, trying to bridge that gap, how productive are you? You know, you can't control what's going on in people's heads, unless we go into an Orwellian 1984 thought police route, which, you know, we could do eventually. I did the last podcast on, all that recorded was on neurosymbiotic AI, so that might not be too far away.
Awesome.
But
it's funny what you said there as well, that about touching on how to do things. As like, when you step into leadership, the first big thing you realize is like, you're not the one adding value sometimes, and it's that one that if you're thinking as a leader who's head of or principal or whatever it happens to be, you're not really adding the value at that point. Like, the people below you add the value. You keep them safe. You're their servant. Whatever they need, you do. And if these people are safe around you, they'll tell you what they need. Like, wheelchair user needs the lifts to open for 10 seconds longer. Okay, let me go annoy property. Sounds ridiculous, but it is a thing that people have gone through. Like, they need buttons and doors, and physical disabilities is a great one to use because that's a thing. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to do that. So it's where you can use that kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis. If your team don't feel safe around you and you're not focused on your people, they ain't going to tell you their problems, and they're going to suffer in silence. And then when it finally gets too much, they're going to leave. They're going to leave nice Glassdoor reviews and call you a knob, like, as opposed to sticking around for 5-10 years. Like, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers.
Which you can almost see in the trend of how long people, so tenure across the board has gone down in the last 5-10 years.
Oh yeah, let's not even talk about data engineers.
Yeah, especially. So I suppose, is there a strong training element to human centric leadership? Do you need to train these leaders, and should there be training leaders? You mentioned a chief psychology officer, so I suppose this relates to, you've mentioned the M point. Ideally it's firmly rooted within businesses, it has someone leading it within the function. Whether it sits in HR, it could be a question, but how do you see, I suppose, the next 5-10 years of this evolving within this? Is the training involved?
There's training involved. There's definitely training involved. Like, I'd hate for it to sit in HR. It's not a criticism of HR by any means. It is a criticism of processes go to HR to die because it gets metricized very quickly. And D&I statistics, when you start having slap fights about, you're a recruiter, how many times have you heard, I just need to recruit more women? Yeah, it's an issue. It's a genuine issue. Like a training side of this. There's a training side of it that probably needs to happen, but I think it's a training side of, you have to ask the question beforehand, like, how do you do self-reflection as a leader? Do you do self-reflection? I've asked at least one of my guys that recently. He's like, oh, no, I guess not. I'm like, start doing it. Start using a journal. End of the day, what you're proud of, what sucks, what doesn't. One of them sat there very recently. An engineer turned around to me and said, like, I've been in therapy for a while. I'm like, fucking mad props to you. I said, I've been there. It's crazy. I said, you finding new stuff? How about yourself? Yeah, I am actually. It's awesome, isn't it? So it's the best thing in the world. Not everyone will go through the therapy track, but the ability to be self-reflective, the ability to kind of sit down, shut up without your headphones on and think, what makes me a person? What makes me a man? What makes me a woman? What makes me whoever I identify as? Like, what is it that makes you tick? Not necessarily as what will make me money, what will make you tick. People make me tick. I love people to pieces. They're bonkers sometimes, but like, love them to pieces generally from top to bottom.
I think you have to enjoy people. I don't think you necessarily have to be a good leader, but you have to. It makes it easier to be a good.
It makes it a lot easier. And like some of the criticism I've got for this is like, well, some people don't want to bed into that. Don't be a good leader then. Go be an individual contributor. Like, go do that. Like, if you want to. I think there's definitely training you can give there, but you can't train people to want to be a good person who can reflect on bad opportunities. I've upset people who are neurodiverse before because of my own anxieties. Like, it stays as a permanent point of, God, I cocked that up, but it makes sure I don't do it again. That's for sure. Like, it's one of those that allows you to grow. And like when the junior engineer breaks prod as a like trial by fire rite of passage that every single engineer has done when we've gone about something, and you get the senior lean over and roll it back and it's fine. It's the same thing. Like, leaders have to go through trials by fire. They have to go through that.
And there's no leadership training. There's no team training. And again,
management training. There's no leader training. There's just no leader training. And people who think they are normally weird influencers who take you for 4 days, take several £1,000s off you. I'm in the wrong business, but it is like that's what they'll do, and it's never really very good. It's like, to be a good leader, you have to know yourself. You can't sit there and lead people by bullshitting, because people these days are like hawks. They see everything you do. They see your failings, I've got them. They see your quirks, I've got them. And they see your good points, I've got them. They see my gaps, I've got them. Everybody has them. The joy of the Johari window is that I know lots about myself, but you see things in me that I don't even see. That's not just my beautiful face with a beard, I promise. But it is stuff that you'll know, and stuff that you'll know that I don't know. And it's without those kind of tools, without those kind of techniques of self-reflection, a leader will never excel. Yeah, they might be a CEO of a business. Be a good leader? Who knows?
And again, it can be when the business is tested. So again, COVID is another good example. We keep bringing it back to that. But when the business...
like it was relevant recently.
Well, it will be continually relevant for the people who went through it. But when the business is severely tested, ultimately it comes down to your people. It's the people that will make or break the business. When your profit margins aren't a mile wide, and when they are razor thin, it's again, I saw this in the company that I worked for. It was the when a lot of people were on furlough, it was the people who weren't on furlough that were carrying the business. They were keeping everyone else in work, which, again, if you are creating a framework like this, I suppose it will lead into having a strong support network that will keep the business running. If when the business starts failing and you don't have that, I suppose everyone will jump ship like drowning rats type of analogy.
Another recruitment friend has recently binned off his firm because they were doing that. They couldn't hit billings, and the bosses were turning around, and it's like, well, you're working late tonight. It's like, well, who am I going to speak to? Like, there's no one to talk to. Everyone's gone home. It's after 5:30, 6 o'clock. The vast majority of hiring managers are not there. So why are you doing?
People at that time, they're not going to be happy.
Oh, yeah. 100%. You interrupt me during like toast time, game over.
Which I think is a good place to stop as any on toast time. But I want to say a big thank you, Nick, for joining me today and discussing Human Centric Leadership. So if you want to learn more about Human Centric Leadership, I'd recommend going and following Nick on LinkedIn. Yep, probably the best way to catch you, because you're posting that
and my blog
and your blog.
humanleadership.blog.
Perfect. Yeah, go check that. I'll probably put a link to that in the description or awesome. Somewhere else. And also for any data engineering stuff, any other funny bits that you'll decide to post as well, whatever.
General shit posting, I'm good at that.
Yeah. Or you can reach out if you're a business and want to learn more about this, just reach out to Nick directly. I'm sure he'll be able to give you a bit of an oversight. Could even maybe come into your business and give a talk or something along those lines about your journey. So although this episode is now over, you can check out the previous episodes for more conversations like this around data, AI, technology, the human element, and everything else in between, with all the interesting guests that I have on. And remember to follow, like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do on whatever platform you're watching this on, to catch more episodes as they're coming out, as more will be released very soon. Actually creating a backlog this time, which should help to releasing them in order and frequently, which is really nice. So see you in the next one.